being that I was bone on bone and still am bone on bone in my left hip, and my right hip is not far behind, but I'm no longer in chronic pain. And the reason is that when I was 39, that's when I was diagnosed with this arthritic hip, and I was making appointments to measure the cartilage, and they wanted to start putting me on anti-inflammatory prescriptions. One doctor said, yeah, they'll probably tell you not to walk or run for exercise anymore. That's when I was like, I am out. I was already leaning towards natural living, and my whole history, my whole life has pointed me towards this, like red flags with health the entire time. I had chronic strep throat. I had chronic staph. I always sick, abscesses. I was definitely autoimmune suppressed. I have Raynaud's. I definitely have Epstein's-Barr. I like to say I grew up on diets and antibiotics, and it's just the truth. My childhood is not unique because plenty of people grew up in a similar way in Los Angeles and other hotbed areas, but most people didn't. I grew up around a lot of industry people, a lot of producers and actors' children and kids who were in commercials. And my family was pretty unique and pretty special. And that's why I'm going to speak about this issue that has been really bothering me. It begins with my hip, because that ultimately is about my gut health and my leaky gut. I always do this. You'll see me do this a lot. Pretend this is a cell and pretend this is a cell. One cell and one cell. They come together. And this is like your intestinal lining, the lining of your gut. And the other side, so here's your food, and the other side is your blood. Okay, what happens is we eat these frankenfoods, and it causes separation between these cells because they become irritated and they swell up. And this tight junction that keeps heavy metals and undigested food particles and pathogens, this tight junction becomes compromised because the cells have swollen up, and that allows these things into our bloodstream. And because these things are in our bloodstream, they're viewed as foreign invaders. And so our body's like, shoo, 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 with the white blood cells, we got to get those invaders. And that creates the inflammation and creates problems because it's like chasing the wind. They're not going to catch these invaders in our blood, but they will lodge themselves into areas, let's say like around our heart where plaque has built up. And then that releases some of that plaque causing heart issues. So they gather up in the joints, and this inflammation gathers where you're compromised. And my entire health journey led to making these radical changes when I finally got the hip diagnosis, that I needed to be eating for my health. And my former mother-in-law is still a good friend. I love this woman. We talk often. We have a great relationship. She's like my guru. She was an ostomy nurse for 40 plus years. I don't know if you know ostomy. It's like colostomy bags. There are several kinds of ostomy, which are insertions into different portions of your intestines. And so she is not only a wound and skin care expert, she's also gut health expert. And beyond that, she is also Reiki trained. She's super into holistics. So she knows her vitamins and she knows her nutrition more than anybody I know. And where am I going with this? Okay, here's the thing. My whole life is a testimony to multiple things, but one, a wellness journey, being sick and being on antibiotics and being in chronic pain, because I was in chronic pain from my hip to my foot every single day. And I was this tomboy, so I take pain, and I'm always kind of natural. So I'm like, I'll drink lots of water, I'll sleep, I'll get over this, it'll pass. And I'm tough, I can take it. And with this, that just didn't happen. So I talked to Sonia, and she pointed me to the fact that the inflammation plays a major role. If I could eliminate the inflammation, then I can eliminate a a lot of the pain. So she pointed me in the right direction, and I started doing a bunch of research, which I love to do. And I learned all about our gut health and autoimmune disease and foods that fight the inflammation. So you can have a healthy diet, but still not be necessarily fighting inflammation. Definitely, there are people who work out who still have and are healthy and appear super healthy, but still have a bunch of inflammation. At this point, it's almost unavoidable in our society because our food has been so compromised. So it takes a lot of intention to actually eliminate it. But for me, it was worth it. When I heard them say not to walk or run for exercise anymore, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. That's not the way, because I know better. I know better. This body is a temple. This body is beautifully and wonderfully made, and it's not weak, and it's not helpless. And our solutions are in nature, and they're around us. So I wasn't going to, at 39, just get a hip replacement and be on prescriptions for the rest of my life. I realize I play with my hair a lot. Sorry. Just stop doing that. It's this cowlick, you guys. It's the cowlick. So what I did is I had to really work on the mindset beyond being on prescriptions and being sick all the time, because of the area that I grew up in and the fact that my mom threw these fantastic parties and she wanted us to present well and look really good. So I had the best mom. Like, we'll talk about that. But she was a product of her time and she wanted us to present well. And so she had me on my first diet in the second grade. I, would have grapefruit and dry toast for breakfast. I'd come home and have a plate of veggies. It was terrible. I'm someone who needs a lot of freedom and to not be told what to eat. And it was always my inclination throughout my teens and into my 20s to have a hard time with diets, because I'm like, F you, don't tell me what to eat. I'm going to eat what I want to eat, like even to myself, right? I would be saying that to myself, F you. Don't tell me what to eat. So I had this huge resistance to diets. I was always athletic, but I was always a little bit overweight and I was sick often. But with this hip, with talking to my former mother-in-law and learning about gut health, everything changed. And I began eating only things that get rid of inflammation. I was in pain and I wanted out of the pain. So that's what it became about. So everything that I ate was anti-inflammatory, not just not inflammatory. The major inflammatories, my major triggers, as I've learned, are gluten, sugar, and stress. But gluten, sugar are very common for people. The seed oils, very common for people. Some people, red meat. Other people have great success on carnivore. The thing to know is that we are all individual. We're all different. Our biomes are different. So what fits somebody might not fit you. The key is in separation, eliminating this separation that causes sickness. Okay, so that's the key. And that became my focus, connecting my gut and eliminating this separation that was allowing the toxins in that was making me sick. So I sealed up my protection, my border here. I sealed it up, and the enemy could no longer infiltrate and get into my bloodstream. And from there, I was able to heal. But it was a very mental space, and it was learning about connecting in my gut lining. But guess what? When we're lonely, which is an epidemic in this country, there's separation in that gut lining because we are inherently stressed from being lonely. They say loneliness has an effect on our bodies to the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day. And so many Americans are lonely, and the devices, the screens are a big part of it. So in order to be healthy, we actually need to be making connection in our gut lining and eating things that repair that. And we need to be connecting with each other. And that's actual and literal. Same thing with connecting to the earth. that is actual and literal, and connecting in faith, which helps relieve stress. Stress causes swelling in this gut lining, which allows the toxins and everything in, which is why things like prayer, meditation, getting out into nature, exercising, things that cause you to de-stress are good for your health. That's like part of why it's the lifestyle change. It's not just a list of foods you can and can't eat. The focus really needs to be on connection in our gut linings. Okay, so I've digressed, but not really. The identity politics of today seems much worse than it was when I was growing up. Looking back at media, I see a lot of inclusion just naturally. And I don't see the commentary of division that I see and hear today. In fact, growing up in LA, I had so many friends from many different cultures, and we didn't bat an eye at that. That's just how it was. I, for one, was always loved it. And I still do love different cultures, and I love learning about different people. So just yesterday, I set in motion a group of us that grew up in Glendale, and all of these friends that I contacted, I know have had stories that they can tell us. And so I'm planning a conversation soon with a diverse group of us who grew up in the same area to talk about this very thing. So I opened up YouTube this morning and listened to Jillian Michaels, and this is actually what she had to say today.
Well, why would Jillian want to talk about this? I grew up in Los Angeles. I appreciated that obviously you look at a magazine cover when you're a kid and you're not conditioned to notice that most people on the magazine covers are white and that there might be one black girl. But as you get older and you start to become more aware, it's like, well, there was the Cosby Show. I didn't realize it was just the Cosby Show as a kid. But as you get older, you start to make changes. And I thought that my generation, our generation, noticed these injustices, these imbalances, and they sort of naturally, and this could be my own ignorance, they naturally began to find their equilibrium. And we had Black people in positions of power in the Supreme Court, in the Oval Office, medicine, entertainment, law, you name it. And I thought we were in a pretty good place prior to 2020. Thought, okay, this is horrific. What can I do to make a difference? So I go to work with the UN, and they say, like, hey, you're great and everything, but we've got Angelina Jolie and Ben Stiller working on this issue here. Maybe you could help us out in South Sudan. I thought, sure, I'll go to South Sudan. The next thing I know, I'm getting attacked by a group called the White Saviors. And everybody's like, oh, God, you can't have these people after you. Like, this is going to ruin you. This is going to destroy your career. So I reach out, like, mea culpa, like, tell me what is the issue? A white girl from the Midwest gets on the phone with me. You have to make a donation. And then proceeds to tell me how she's protecting Black people in Africa from other white people. And I'm like, aren't you the ultimate white savior then? So you have to make a donation, and then it's a white person engaging in this. Nobody Black runs the organization. And that was when I started to really question, like, what the hell is behind this? What's going on?
Okay, so it seems to me, and I know that it seems the same way to many other people, that there is an intentional wrench being thrown into the race relations game. It's being weaponized. And the truth is that any racism, including reverse racism, is still racism. Anything that's causing separation is going to be causing illness and is going to be causing sickness, whether it's in our gut lining or within our society. The truth is that each of us is fascinating. Each of us is wondrously made. It doesn't matter how much melanin we have in our skin. We're each incredibly and inherently valuable. And I've used the metaphor of the stained glass window before, but I love it. It's my favorite, and I think it totally applies. We're like individual pieces of an incredible masterpiece, a stained glass window, and we're each an individual piece of glass. And each of us is a different hue. Some of us are wavy, some of us are thinner, some of us are thicker, some have air bubbles showing through, and we're each a different shape. We're each unique and we're each marvelous, and we need to allow for connection to happen so that we can shine and we can cast light around to the others around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as a seemingly super white lady, I want to tell you about how I was raised and some things about my parents that may or may not surprise you, but this is it. Okay. So, check it out. Okay. So I grew up in LA, Glendale, and I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I was actually the surprise. I love that my parents call me a surprise and not a mistake, but I was definitely a surprise. I'm 13 years younger than my oldest sibling, who actually was an addict and an alcoholic. I'll get to that. She actually passed away 17 years ago. And then my other sister, and then my brother, then my parents were fantastic. I had really stellar parenting. Like, I was very blessed in that, and very stable, like secure financially and secure emotionally, was incredibly blessed. But it wasn't all perfect and it wasn't all roses. My dad was born in 1928, and he's the oldest of 2 kids, and his younger sister had Down syndrome, and my auntie Jean, and he loved her and took care of her, and she actually lived to be 52 years old, which for a Down syndrome individual born in the 30s, that's really remarkable. And that's because his family took care of her. Like, at that time, it was not uncommon to hospitalize someone with Down syndrome, but instead of hospitalizing her, they educated her and loved her. And when my grandmother began working in the schools, Jeannie would go with her. And so she had a job and was educated and had a purpose. So she lived to be 52 years old. She and my dad were very close. But having been born in 1928, my dad was a child of the Depression and of World War II. He was just young enough that he couldn't fight in the war. But my dad was super smart, and he, in elementary school, was sent to a school for gifted students in the LA area. And at that school, his best friend was Paul Camara, who was Japanese. And my dad's family really struggled in the Depression. He remembers his parents not eating so that he and Jean could eat. It's because they were connected to other families and other families with children with Down syndrome that they were able to pull through the Depression. But my dad and his best friend Paul were at this special school for gifted kids, and then Manzanar happened. And if you're not familiar with Manzanar, those are the concentration camps, or Manzanar was one of the concentration camps that we had here in the United States during World War II. So my dad watched his best friend's family get displaced and their business be destroyed, and all of them become imprisoned in Manzanar. Paul was young enough and born in the United States, so he eventually was able to sign this release that they had for these younger kids. And he signed the release and was released from Manzanar to my dad's family. My dad grew up in Lincoln Heights in LA, which is not a gentle area of LA. It's kind of gang territory at this point. At that point, not so much, but his family took in Paul, and as a result, they were ostracized within the community. But they took that heat because that's the right thing to do. It didn't matter that Paul was Japanese. Who cares? Like, we're not sitting around thinking about that. We're loving genuinely and authentically. And that is what we need in society. That the division is what makes us sick in our gut lining and with each other. So this very much impacted my dad. Plus, the war, he was the expert at his school on the war, and he actually has these notebooks that he kept where he kept a tally of all the tanks and ships, artillery that each side had of the war. And he kept all the major headlines. And apparently, each week at the school, my dad would give updates to everybody on the war. So he was super impacted, you guys. And my dad was brilliant. My dad's family obviously did not have a lot of money, and he graduated early, was accepted to every single school, of course, that he wanted to go to, and he got scholarships everywhere. Ivy League schools, you name it. But he got full academic scholarship to UCLA, and that allowed him to live at home and work and go to school. And as he worked a couple jobs and went to school at UCLA, he actually helped his parents financially and would give them about half of the paycheck each time. You know, assumptions that things were handed to us is they're just not right. I get the white skin, and so people might react differently. And yeah, you know what? There are a-holes everywhere, and that's undeniable, and 100%. And there are a-holes with every level of melanin in their skin, not just a super mellow amount. And that's the reality. That's the reality of it. And so beyond that, there are so many stories of my dad helping people. So my dad was actively good to disadvantaged people, no matter their skin tone. And often the people who were disadvantaged were of a different culture or of a different race, right? And that's also the reality that a lot of this is a socioeconomic issue, not just an issue of melanin. So my dad ultimately went to UCLA on the full academic scholarship, and then he graduated, and at that time it was the Korean conflict. So he joined the Army. These are his dog tags. And when he joined the Army, he went to officer candidacy school and came out a lieutenant. And he actually never served overseas, but he was stationed in Utah and tested like A-bombs and stuff like that. And then after the war, he came back to Los Angeles and went back to UCLA for his law degree, and ultimately became a senior partner of a major LA law firm. My dad actually retired at 52 because he saw that the integrity was slipping out of his business, and the firm was taking cases that were about money and not necessarily about integrity and about doing the right thing. Because the number one thing that I think defines my dad would be integrity. Between his sister being Down syndrome and them being a part of a community of families of Down syndrome children, having Paul as his best friend, to also just growing up in Los Angeles. So for me, in my experience as this man's child, we like had exchange students from other countries come and live with us. I grew up with stacks of National Geographic and World Magazine. I was actually an ambassador to communist Eastern Europe, in part because of my dad's role. Like all my uncles were attorney generals and politicians. And so obviously there was a connection with that. But I grew up in this conversation, and I grew up wanting to understand and build a bridge and unite and not be in a place of division That's not what so many of us were raised to embrace. We are all fascinating. I just want to be clear that things have not always been this way. And we need to work to connect, not just in our gut lining, but with each other. And the division that is being sown in this day, we can actually combat, and we can actually seal off, just as we can connect our gut lining, we can connect with each other, and we can stop this flow of toxicity. And I think we need to do it. And so the division that we're seeing in this time is a conversation to be had. I intend to have one with a really great group of people that is coming up, but I would like to hear what you have to say about this. Please speak from your heart, because we need to be connecting on an authentic and real level for our actual physical health as well as the health of our society. All right, you guys, make it a great day. Thanks for watching. Also, check this part out. Hey, be sure to like and share, and please subscribe.